Our first story is about families, Native families in BC, and how many Indian children have been apprehended by the government, taken off the reserves, and sent to live in white foster homes. On Monday, more than 2,000 Indians will arrive in Vancouver by caravan to protest a new provincial law they say gives the government even greater control over Native children. Recently, we went to the Spell Machine Reserve near Vernon for a first-hand look at the problem, to find out what might be done about it, and to hear why Indians think the government is stealing their children.
I was 8 years old when my father had gone out to work in the bush. He was a logger. And he had my brother and his girlfriend look after me and my younger brothers, my 3 younger brothers. And the welfare had come around and they said that they were going to be taking us.
Sheila Kinbasket is 22. She was one of 100 children apprehended by the Ministry of Human Resources and taken off the Spallamsheen Reserve since 1951. After living with white foster parents for 8 years, she came back to the reserve, where she lives with her daughter Ida.
The welfare had come over there and there was just my grandmother and my aunt there at the time, and the welfare come in there and told my grandmother that she should have all my clothes ready, that they'll be back the next day to pick me up, and that my dad had given consent that they could take us.
Why did your father give consent?
He didn't.
I ran away from the residential school, and I was hitchhiking, and these people picked me up, and then the next thing I knew I was in a foster home.
When Harvey Monroe Alexander was 2, his mother died. He lived with various Indian families until the age of 11, when he was apprehended. He then lived in 5 foster homes with white parents. Now, at the age of 26, he's confused.
Oh, a lot of places, like they, said to be family, but a lot of places used me more or less like for work, and a lot of the homes most of them, a couple of them I was sexually abused, and they were all white foster homes, and I didn't feel like I was part of the family because I knew I was Indian, and I was having a hard time distinguishing if I wanted to be Indian or if I wanted to be a white person. I felt really torn up, or a lot of times I felt like, committing suicide because I didn't know who I belonged to.
The people who talk to us in the Spell Machine Reserve have seen many Indian young people like Harvey. In British Columbia, 40% of the children in care are Indian. Most of those children are placed in foster homes. Most of the foster parents are white. For the majority of those children, the transition from living in an Indian home, which includes an extended family with Indian values, to a non-Indian home is very difficult. It's very different. It's traumatic.
There was 2 instances. One, all the lady considered me as was a chore boy, and this one place I went to, all that they ever did was make me work.
Were you allowed to see your family during this period of time?
No, they told us that the welfare said we couldn't go and see our parents.
The sexual abuse that you talked about, where did that come from?
That came through my first foster home, and in my 3rd foster home, with the lady that was there tried to sexually abuse me too all the time. That's why a lot of times I'd run away.
It had me scared the last 2 years, because I thought I wasn't going to make it back here in time.
In time for?
I thought my father was going to pass away. I started dreaming about that, and he was going to pass away, and he kept reaching out to me. And each time he never made it. So I figured, well, I'm not going to stay in a foster home no more. And when my chance came up, I joined in with a few of my friends from the group home that I was in. And we left, and I told them while I was coming to Enderby, and they came with me.
Laura Williams is the mother of 4 and lives in a 1-bedroom house on the reserve. A year ago, all 4 children were apprehended by Human Resources. I asked her why.
I have an alcohol problem. I've been an alcoholic all my life. In and out of jail.
Do you feel then that your children should have been taken away from you?
Yes, for their own protection.
What do you feel was wrong then about what happened to them when they were taken away?
They were put in a foster home where I didn't want them to be. I wanted them to be in an Indian foster home.
As Laura herself admits, the apprehension was justified. However, she objected when they were placed in a white home. Worried about her children losing their language and culture, she took those fears to the Spell Machine Band Council, who, under the leadership of Chief Wayne Christian, took up her cause with the Ministry of Human Resources and won. Laura's children were placed with a relative, Wayne Christian.
In my mind, like the provincial government has never really recognized our rights or even our culture. And this goes back a long time. It goes back to when this province was first began as a province. And all through that time, there's always been a conflict with our culture and the non-Indian culture. And ever since then, they've been trying to assimilate us. And one of the quickest way to assimilate a people is to destroy the family unit and take the children and force them to live in non-Indian homes, to learn a different value system. And henceforth, in my mind, it's a planned type thing. And in other words, why else would they keep doing what they're doing? It's causing a lot of problems. In my mind, it has to stop.
How many of the apprehensions would you say were necessary?
It depends what you term necessary. The whole thing is there's always been a conflict between the non-Indian social workers and our lifestyle. Like in a lot of the cases, the children were living with grandparents, and their parents were off working in orchards or down across the line picking apples and those kinds of things. And just because the children weren't with their natural parents, the non-Indian social worker felt that was neglect, for instance. And all these types of things that have happened. There are cases where grandparents here have fought off social workers physically and told them, get the hell out of this house. We don't want you here. I don't want you taking my grandchildren.
You're not saying, though, that there aren't problems on the reserve and that there aren't problems in some families.
No, I'm not saying that. It's quite clear in my mind that all the strongest and the most vital resource in our mind as the people here as of Spell Machine is the children. What's more vital than protecting our own children and having them to carry on those battles with the governments? The problems that exist in our community are problems that are created outside of our community and forced upon us. Like I said, the governments have been trying to assimilate us, and people are rebelling against that in a lot of different ways. Turning to alcohol, put in jails, they drop out of high school, all these kinds of things. Our people are still rebelling against a system that they believe will take away a lot of their culture and a lot of their heritage.
The Spell Machine Band decided they had to take matters into their own hands. They had to control child welfare on their reserve. This summer, they passed a bylaw, and a committee was established made up of members of the band and representatives from Indian Affairs and Human Resources. Any problems involving children are dealt with by that committee. However, final authority still lies with Human Resources, and the Indian people distrust that authority. For example, Wayne expressed fears about the new Family and Child Service Act, soon to become law. He felt that under the new legislation, it would be too easy to apprehend a child, as no warrant will be needed unless a social worker is denied access to a home, and then it will take only a call to a judge to get a warrant. We asked Human Resources Minister, Grace McCarthy, about this.
Now, in terms of apprehension, please do not imply that our people in the Ministry of Human Resources, our social workers, are aggressively going around with a too easy capability of apprehending children simply because they want to. They are only doing so because the child is in need of protection, because of neglect or abuse.
However, what the Indian people fear is that in some cases, because of an inherent cultural difference, there's a gap between what the social worker perceives and what the reality is. They cite the example of a child apprehended because there was no food in the house, when in fact, there were racks containing dried moose meat. The problem is compounded by the fact that the money for Indian children in care actually comes from the Department of Indian Affairs. They give it to Human Resources. The band wants that money. Indian Affairs says that legally they are obliged to continue their agreement with Human Resources.
We need those resources to build the programs that we want. Like we need child care workers to work individually with children that need to know who they are. And we need family support workers to work with the parents, you know. We're also looking at things like developing our own group home with our own house parents for children that have no other place to go but need a place to stay. And, you know, those types of resources we want to build into the program. But like I said, we need those dollar resources that now presently go to Human Resources to build that type of thing.
I asked Grace McCarthy if she would be willing to turn the funds over to the band. She said that can't be done under existing legislation, but indicated the ministry would support the Indians in other ways.
Well, all they have to do is work with us as we have demonstrated in other areas, and it is possible to have that working arrangement, and we would be grateful to receive their input in that.
But there is the conflict. The Indian people don't want to work within that system. They want total control.
McCarthy, in my mind, is introducing something that continues the practice of having our children being taken from their communities and providing us no recourse other than to take it to political action and force them to recognize that we have that authority.
The caravan is part of that action. But in the meantime, there are more immediate problems such as the reintegration of those who were apprehended as children and have come back to the reserve as young adults.
From what I have seen, children may be placed in a non-Indian home where there's kindness and consideration and love. It doesn't change them from being an Indian. Apparently, those children will, at a certain age, come back to the reserve.
Mary Thomas is an elder. She's proud of being an Indian and is distressed by what she's seen happening to her people over the years.
So they come back to the reserve, and they're lost. They don't even know who their relatives are. They don't even know what their identity is all about. And it's just confusing. Those, I have spoken to quite a few of them that have been getting into trouble. And they'll refer to things that happened in that home that they were too afraid to speak about. And I notice those children when they've come back to our reserve, and they're the ones that we're having problems with.
Randy Williams is 20. He's one of those who's come back to the reserve, and he's become the unofficial spokesman for others like himself.
A lot of it is facing what the reserve is. Like, there's a lot of drinking in that. And a lot of people that drink were people that their young children were taken away. And I asked my mother once, she was a heavy drinker, why she drank so much. And she says, all the children are growing up. My purpose is over. So a lot of the people were robbed of their purpose when their children were taken away. And they had nothing more to really live for. But just drinking and being with other people that felt the same. When I came back, I drank for the first year, just straight when I came back to the reserve. And then I started to see that there had to be a different way, and I wanted to find it. So I quit drinking for about a year now.
Things are happening that we have, as an elder, that gives me a lot of, hope and encouragement that are happening today that indicates that we are awakening and that we are going to better ourselves if given a chance.
The people here live varied lives. Some are desperate. Some are simply poor. Others would be acceptable by white middle-class standards. We had been skeptical about what we'd be allowed to see, at least what we'd be encouraged to see. We found the people very open. They didn't try to pretend that all was well. They admitted there were children who needed protection. But throughout, we found the same theme. They want to take care of it themselves.
I was 12 years old. I was working down across the line in the States with an Indian person down there. I was picking apples and making props and stuff. Came home, and the first thing I noticed was that it was really quiet. I walked into the house, and my mother was sitting there with my little sister. She was just not even a year old yet. I asked Mom, where is everybody? She said, the welfare had taken everybody. And it hurt. You know? My mom is not very vocal. She doesn't know what to do. And they took all the kids from her. And God damn, it hurt. It still hurts today when I think about it.
You cannot change adults' attitudes, very seldom, but you can work on the little ones. They're the ones that be our future Indian population. They're the ones that we have to work on.
Obviously, there are many dedicated foster parents who provide excellent care for their children. But as Indians continue to press for greater control over their own lives, stories like this will become more and more a matter of public concern and debate. Next on Pacific Report, profits versus employment, an old saw in the forest industry. Stay with us.